In the world of football, moments of glory are often born from moments of chaos. On February 15, 2003, in the hallowed corridors of Old Trafford, a single, unintended act would etch itself into the annals of the beautiful game. A flying boot, a split-second outburst, and a fracture in a legendary bond. This is the story of David Beckham and Sir Alex Ferguson. David Beckham was more than a footballer. He was a phenomenon. From the moment he burst onto the scene as a wiry teenager, his right foot was a wand conjuring free kicks that defied physics and crosses that seemed to find their target with divine precision. By 2003, he was Manchester United's golden boy, a key cog in the machine that had dominated English football under the iron fist of Sir Alex Ferguson. Together, they had won 6 Premier League titles, an FA Cup, and the unforgettable Champions League trophy in 1999. The treble-winning season of 1998-99 had cemented their bond, a partnership forged in sweat, sacrifice, and silverware. Beckham was the poster boy of a generation, and Ferguson was the mastermind who shaped him. But beneath the surface of this glittering alliance, cracks were forming. Cracks that would soon erupt into one of football's most infamous scandals. By the turn of the millennium, David Beckham was no longer just a footballer. He was a global icon. His marriage to Victoria Adams, a member of the Spice Girls, had catapulted him into a world of celebrity that transcended the pitch. Paparazzi followed his every move, capturing snapshots of his tailored suits, ever-changing hairstyles, and glamorous lifestyle. Endorsements with Adidas, Pepsi, and Armani filled his bank account, while magazine covers and talk show appearances made him a household name far beyond the footballing world. To the fans, he was a hero, the working-class lad from East London who lived their dreams. To the press, he was a headline machine, his every step fodder for tabloids. But to Sir Alex Ferguson, his manager, mentor, and father figure, Beckham's growing fame was a distraction, a dangerous drift from the discipline that had made Manchester United a dynasty. Sir Alex Ferguson was a man of singular focus. To him, football was a religion, and Old Trafford was his cathedral. He demanded total commitment from his players, a devotion that bordered on obsession. His managerial genius lay not just in tactics but in his ability to mold young men into warriors, to instill a hunger for victory that burned brighter than any individual ego. For years, Beckham had embodied that ethos. He trained harder than most, his work ethic matching his prodigious talent. His dedication on the pitch was unquestionable, his stamina and precision a testament to hours spent perfecting his craft. But as the 2002-2003 season unfolded, Ferguson began to see a different Beckham, one whose priorities seemed to be shifting. The manager's frustration simmered, fueled by the belief that his star midfielder was being seduced by the allure of stardom. The late-night events, the media frenzy, the whispers of Hollywood, it all grated on Ferguson, who saw football as a sacred pursuit, untarnished by the trappings of fame. The tension between Beckham and Ferguson wasn't new. It had been building for months, perhaps years. It began with small things. Beckham's occasional tardiness at training, his high-profile absences for commercial commitments, the way his name seemed to dominate headlines more than the team's. Ferguson, a man who valued control above all else, felt the balance of power shifting. Beckham was no longer the eager young player desperate for his manager's approval. He was a global superstar, a brand unto himself. To Ferguson, this was a betrayal of the Manchester United ethos, where no player was bigger than the club. To Beckham, it was simply the reality of his life. He was 27, at the peak of his powers but also at a crossroads. The demands of fame, family, and football were pulling him in different directions. He loved Manchester United, the club that had given him everything, but he also craved the freedom to be more than just a footballer. He was a husband, a father, a man navigating a world that saw him as both an icon and a commodity. The stage was set on a cold February evening at Old Trafford. Manchester United, the reigning kings of English football, faced Arsenal in the FA Cup 5th round. It was a chance for redemption after a season of inconsistent results. Arsenal, led by the brilliance of Patrick Vieira and Thierry Henry, were formidable opponents, their slick passing and relentless pace a stark contrast to United's faltering form. Beckham, wearing the captain's armband in the absence of Roy Keane, was expected to lead by example. But the match was a disaster. United were outclassed, their defense torn apart, their attack toothless. Beckham, tasked with dictating the tempo, struggled to make an impact. His passes went astray, his set pieces lacked their usual venom. The final whistle blew, and the scoreline read 2-0 to Arsenal. The theater of dreams fell silent, the weight of defeat hanging heavy in the air. In the dressing room, the atmosphere was suffocating. The players sat in silence, their heads bowed, the sting of failure burning in their chests. Ferguson stormed in, his face a mask of fury. To him, this wasn't Euro T just a loss. It was a betrayal of everything he stood for. His voice, thick with his Scottish burr, cut through the room like a blade. He tore into the team, his words laced with venom, but his gaze kept returning to Beckham. The captain had been a shadow of himself, his performance emblematic of the Team Euro's malaise. Ferguson's frustration, bottled up for months, erupted. He accused Beckham of not tracking back, of failing to press, of letting his team down. The words stung, each one a dart aimed at Beckham's pride. According to accounts from those in the room, Beckham, never one to back down, responded. His voice, usually measured, carried an edge of defiance. He swore, a rare lapse for a player known for his composure. The word sharp, angry, hung in the air, a direct challenge to Ferguson's authority. The room froze. Ferguson, his face reddening, stepped forward. In a moment of blind rage, he kicked out at a pile of equipment on the floor. A single football boot, lying among the scattered kit, took flight. It wasn't aimed at anyone, just a release of pent-up fury. But fate had other plans. The boot arced through the air, its trajectory a cruel twist of physics, and struck David Beckham just above his left eye. The impact was immediate. Beckham staggered back, blood trickling from a gash on his brow. The room erupted into chaos. Players leapt to their feet, some rushing to Beckham, others trying to calm Ferguson. Ryan Giggs and Gary Neville, Beckham's closest allies, held him back as he lunged toward the manager, his own anger boiling over. Ferguson, realizing what had happened, stood frozen, his rage giving way to shock. The boot hadn't been aimed at Beckham. It was a freak accident, a moment of reckless frustration, but the damage was done. Beckham Euro's face, bloodied and bruised, was a symbol of a relationship that had reached its breaking point. Carlos Queiroz, Ferguson Euro's assistant, later described the incident as a fluke. Ferguson hadn't a Euro T meant to hit Beckham. He Euro D simply lashed out at the nearest object, and the boot had ricocheted off a table. But in the heat of the moment, intent didn't a Euro T matter. To Beckham, it felt personal, a physical manifestation of the criticism he Euro D endured for months. To Ferguson, it was a mistake, but one that underscored his growing disillusionment with his star player. The dressing room, once a sanctuary of unity, had become a battleground. In the days that followed, the incident exploded into a media frenzy. Pictures of Beckham with a plaster above his eye dominated the front pages. Headlines screamed of a rift, of a manager losing control, of a club in crisis. The tabloids reveled in the drama, painting Ferguson as a tyrant and Beckham as a victim. Fans were divided, some sided with Ferguson, believing his iron-fisted approach was necessary to maintain United's dominance. Others saw Beckham as a scapegoat, punished for daring to be more than a footballer. The truth, as always, lay somewhere in between. For Beckham, the incident was a turning point. The physical scar would heal, 2 stitches and a few days' rest, but the emotional wound cut deeper. He had given everything to Manchester United, his boyhood club, the place where he Euro D grown from a shy teenager into a global star. But the flying boot was a reminder that loyalty in football was fleeting. Ferguson, the man he Euro D once revered as a father figure, had become his adversary. The trust that had defined their relationship was shattered. Ferguson, too, was shaken. In his autobiography, he would later admit that the incident was a low point, a moment when his temper got the better of him. But he stood by his belief that Beckham Euro's focus had waned, that his commitment to the team had been compromised by the trappings of fame. To Ferguson, the boot was an accident, but the underlying tension was real. He saw Beckham's departure as inevitable, a necessary sacrifice to preserve the club's culture. By the summer of 2003, the writing was on the wall. Beckham, still a world-class talent, was sold to Real Madrid for £24.5 million. The transfer marked the end of an era at Manchester United. For Beckham, it was a chance to start anew, to embrace the global stage that awaited him in Spain. For Ferguson, it was a chance to rebuild, to refocus his team on the principles that had made them champions. Both men moved on, but the flying boot lingered in their memories, a symbol of a bond broken by pride, pressure, and the unrelenting demands of football. Years later, both Beckham and Ferguson would reflect on the incident with a mix of regret and perspective. Beckham, ever the diplomat, downplayed the drama, insisting that the media had blown it out of proportion. He spoke of his respect for Ferguson, calling him the greatest manager he'd ever played for, a man who shaped his career and his character. Ferguson, too, softened with time, acknowledging Beckham's contributions to Manchester United's legacy. The boot, he said, was a mistake, but the tensions were real, a clash of personalities, of visions, of eras. The flying boot incident is more than just a footnote in football history. It's a story of human frailty, of the collision between ambition and loyalty, between discipline and individuality. It's a reminder that even the greatest partnerships can fracture under the weight of expectation. For David Beckham and Sir Alex Ferguson, it was a moment of chaos that defined their legacies a Euro. Not as a moment of weakness, but as a testament to their passion for the game. In the end, the boot didn't just leave a scar on Beckham Euro's brow. It left an indelible mark on the soul of football.